Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm Sam Sadaw from Egypt. I am a Ruminant Technical Manager at La Chance Group. Today, presentation will focus on bile acid application in ruminant. Our PPT today is divided in a few parts for introduction to bile acid and the mechanism of it, and the application in applied science, and the perspective of bile acid in ruminant nutrition in the future, and the last one for overseas customer. Bile acid is a molecule secreted in the liver and stored in the bile to be using after stored and combined with glycine and the taurine, and then doing it is functional and biological active. Here, if we look at bile acid composition, bile acid is a compound molecules contain steroid nucleus connected with carboxyl group. Steroid contain 17 carbon atoms and is connected with carboxyl. Carboxyl contain 7 carbon atoms. So in total, bile acid contain 24 carbon atoms. This is the normal one, and in some cases it contains more than carbon atom to be up to 27 carbon atoms. If we talk about bile acid synthesis, so it is a compound and also it is complicated sometimes. Bile acid first step is secreted in hepatocyte liver in the liver. From cholesterol and then to be converted to primary bile acid via 7-alpha hydroxylase. Primary bile acid contain two categories, cholic acid and chenodeoxylic acid. This is the two primary bile acid. After conversion from cholesterol to primary bile acid is compound with glycine and taurine. Each of this cholic acid and chenodeoxylic acid is compound each or both with taurine and glycine before secreted and stored in the bile. After eat the food, bile acid is started to secreted in the small intestine, where in ileum as the third part of the small intestine to be absorbed via apical sodium bile acid cotransporter ASPT to return to the liver, to return again to the liver to reuse and to resynthesis. The amount return around 95% is returned to the liver via peripheral circulation. The remaining small amount, around 5%, this is reached to the large intestine, where by the action of microflora to be converted to secondary bile acid. There are three compound of secondary bile acid, like lysocholic acid and deoxycholic acid and also deoxycholic acid. Some amount in large intestine is returned to the liver again via peripheral circulation, and some is exerted in the face. So this is the first point in bile acid synthesis. The second point I would like also to mention here, when the bile acid is absorbed in the small intestine, this is to make activation of nuclear receptor. The famous two group of this FXR and the TGR5. FXR, it is the farnesoid X receptor, and this is the common name is bile acid receptor, because bile acid, when it's absorbed in the small intestine, is a compound with FXR receptor to activate it. When it's activated, it stimulate gene expression that participate in lipid metabolism. And the second one, the second nuclear receptor, TGR5. This is named the Takeda G protein coupled receptor, and this is also involved in glucose metabolism. And there are also, after the absorption of bile acid, also it is activate and control GI hormone secretion like GLP, glycogen-like protein. And GLP is secreted in the small intestine in ill cells and also is participating and control in glucose metabolism. For the bile acid is approved as a supplemental in animal nutrition in 2014, and the La Chance group attained the approval from Ministry of Agriculture in China in 2014 to be approved as a complementary and supplemental use in animal nutrition, and now also is approved to use in ruminant nutrition. During the synthesis of bile acid is across through many steps and many times to synthesis from saponification and oxidation and acidification reduction, and the washing and the acid removal, and the last step of drying and the package to be sold for the animal use. Bile acid is the first product that approved to use in animal production sector and in beef and also in monogastric and in aquaculture. The company is a leading one and it is a pioneer in bile acid in China and also in the world, since this is the first group, the first product used in the world. As we talk in bile acid, and it is relation to improve the efficiency of digestion of fat and absorption sequentially. So it is important to mention the anatomy of stomach in ruminant animal. As we know, the ruminant is a compound of 4 compartments. In total, it is named rumen. The first part is the rumen, and this is a large compartment, and this is considered as a big fermenter. Here, it contains billion of microorganisms from bacteria, from protozoa, from archaea. All of this is assisting in degrading the feed and the carbohydrate, and also degraded protein and other feed nutrients to the first unit or the primary compound. In the second compartment, reticulum, and here this is like as a canal to connect rumen and to omesum. Where in omesum, the major function is to drying the feed and absorb the water, and then to pass to the last one, to abomesum. Where in abomesum, it is the enzymatic digestion is occur in this part, and the pH is lower because the secretion of HCl, hydrochloric acid, and many of enzymatic that assist in fat and the protein and the carbohydrate digestion and secretion. Here, for the mechanism of fat and absorption in ruminant, the fat in ruminant mainly is coming from 2 sources. The first one from the feed, and the second source from dietary supplement. First, I will talk about the feed from the basal diet, and then we will talk about the fat from supplemental source, such as rumen protected fat. In the first fatty acid, that is means the triglyceride, and the triglyceride, it is a Latin names, that is mean tri, it is 3, that is contains 3 fatty acid connected with glycerol by ester bond. This is the primary form of triglyceride. In the rumen, when the animal eat fat in the rumen, this compound to be degraded by the microflora to separate glycerol and free fatty acid. This is the first step, and this is named hydrolysis. The second step, and also it is very important, this is named the biohydrogenation, And this is a step also is performed by microflora. The function of biohydration is to convert unsaturated fatty acid to saturated fatty acid. After that, free fatty acid is reached to the small intestine. Small intestine contains three parts: duodenum and jejunum and ileum. In the first part, in duodenum, where is the secretion of bile acid and the lipase. When the fat is reached to the small intestine in this part, as I mentioned, bile acid is making emulsification of fat. That is mean he try increase the surface area of fat. So after that, it can increase the efficiency absorption of lipase to make micelles. Micelle is a droplet, and this is the important part in fat digestion and fat absorption. After forming the micelle, it's reached to the second part in jejunum, where the absorption of free fatty acid is occurred. Free fatty acid is absorbed in the small intestine wall. After absorption and across the small intestine, and inside the small intestine here, we can show it is reconverted back to the triglyceride again, as the first form here of the animal ate. After converted to triglyceride, is to be transported to the lymph and carried out by chylomicron and lipoprotein, where to secrete to reach to the lymphatic system. The lymphatic system is to be secreted in the milk, as example, or to be stored in the body tissue. This is the first form of fatty acid in the diet. The second form in supplemental, like rumen protected fat and sodium calcium salt. This form is already saturated fatty acid, and this is to cross the rumen without any modification, without any change. Here in apomesum, the rumen protected is pH sensitive. That is mean the cover and the protected is to be degraded under the effect of lower pH in the small intestine around 3.5. So it to be reached after that to the small intestine with the action of bile acid and the lipase to be digested and then to absorb it as the previous one. In the rumen also at the same time here, fatty acid, short chain fatty acid. There are many kinds of fatty acid based in the classification and in many factors. There are short chain fatty acid, and this is up to 5 carbon atom, and medium from 6 up to 14, and long chain fatty acid at least 14 carbon atom and more than. There are also classification based in the essential, if the body can able to synthesize fatty acid or not. If the body can able to synthesize, so that is named non-essential, because it can able to synthesize from the food and the diet. In case of the body can't be able to synthesize, so that is named essential fatty acid. The famous example of this omega-3 and omega-6, so it must to be added in the diet. Otherwise, the body can't be able to synthesize, and this is lead to make problem. Here in the rumen, free fatty acid, and after the hydrolysis to make the short chain fatty acid from carbohydrate by the action of microflora, and this is to absorb it via rumen cell wall, and then to be secreted in the udder, where to make the short chain fatty acid by de novo synthesis, and then to be secreted in the milk. Bile acid is secreted and synthesized by the liver, and the liver is an important organ in our body because it is responsible for many vital life function and job. As example of function of liver, but this is not all, just apply for the important point. Participate in metabolism of lipid and the carbohydrate and the protein, and also bile production, secretion, and blood detoxification, and remove endotoxin and mycotoxin. So it can improve liver function and the liver health, and also enzyme activation such as ELT and EST, alanine aminotransferase, and aspartate aminotransferase, and also storage as a store of glycogen and the vitamins and some mineral also, and also excretion of cholesterol and hormone and the drug. And the last point also, he synthesizes plasma proteins such as albumin and clotting factors that can assist in making clotting of the blood. Because a lot of work and many function and fetal that liver participate in this, so the liver is more susceptible to insult and to injury, and this is lead finally to decrease the efficiency and affect the liver function. So there are a question here, so it can ask, how can bile acid decrease fatty liver? As an important and one of the main problem that faced dairy producer and animal production sector, especially for lactating dairy cow and high producing dairy cows. So here we would like to take a look at this. First, the animal is store fat in adipose tissue here, as we show. Here, adipose tissue when the animal calving and give birth, so it is start to produce milk, especially for high lactating dairy cows, and also at the same time, the dry matter intake and the feed intake, it is not enough to cover the high demand for milk production. In addition to other factors like change in hormonal and the behavior and the feeding and the diet management, and change the diet before calving and after calving, and environment also, in addition to other factors. So all these factors combined together, so that is make the cow to fall under metabolic disorder disease. Here we focus in fatty liver and the ketosis as a famous metabolic disease, and cause a lot of waste of money for producer. Adipose tissue is compounded from triglyceride, and in that time to be produce non-steroid fatty acid. Non-steroid fatty acid is to be secreted directly in the other part of this, and is to going to the liver. When it's reached to the liver, there are two ways. The first one is esterification. Esterification, that is meant to produce triglyceride. Triglyceride to be stored as a fat in the liver, so it can cause fatty liver, and this is a big problem for the dairy cows. And second option, to convert it to very low density lipoprotein, FLDL. FLDL to be secreted in the milk. So how triglyceride can convert to very low density lipoprotein? There are many compound and products can assist in converting triglyceride to very low density lipoprotein. One of this product, bile acid. When a sufficient amount of bile acid, that is stimulate hepatocyte cells to convert the triglyceride to very low density lipoprotein. So it can solve the first problem of fatty acid and minimize the incidence rate of fatty liver. In most cases, fatty liver is compound with the ketosis. That is mean most of time ketosis and fatty liver is occur at the same time, simultaneously. The second way for non-steroid fatty acid in the liver to be oxidized to produce energy and the carbon dioxide. But this is occur when the oxidation is complete. But there are sometimes the oxidation is not complete. In that case, that produce ketone body. Ketone body like beta hydroxybutyrate and acetoacetic and acetone. And this is make the larger problem also for the dairy cow, because elevated ketone body in the cow, this is lead to the reduced milk production and negatively affect the immunity of the cow and the health, and decrease feed intake, and also involved with the secondary problem like increased culling rate and mortality and increased days open of the cow, in addition to other problem also, but this is the main important problem. Also, bile acid can activate pharmacoid receptor, as we mentioned in the previous slide. So FXR, after activation and connected with the bile acid, it can activate transcription of several genes that modulate lipid metabolism. As bile acid control and modulate triglyceride metabolism, so how bile acid can modulate triglyceride metabolism? To answer this, there are two ways and two explanations. The first one is the transcription level, and the second one in metabolic level. In the first one, on the transcription level, bile acid activate FXR. FXR activation when compound with bile acid, so it can activate several genes involved in lipid metabolism, such as example of this gene, a small heterodimer partner, SHP, and the second one, apolipoprotein C double. And also bile acid activate FXR. In addition, also he control and modulate and control bile acid secretion itself. How? When bile acid is secreted in the small intestine, is activated FXR. Activation of FXR, he induced fibroblast growth factor 15, 19. After activation, elevated fibroblast growth factor is reached to the hepatocyte in the liver. When it's reached to the hepatocyte, is compound with fibroblast growth factor receptor. After activation, it sending a signal to the liver to decrease bile acid secretion. So it can control its synthesis also at the same time, in addition to participate in other function. The second one, as the metabolic level, lowering bile acid biosynthesis, this is lead to increase cholesterol level. Increase cholesterol level, that is lead to activate sterol regulatory element binding protein, SREP. After activation of SREP, this is directly lead to decrease triglyceride concentration. So in this case, we give a proof how bile acid can control triglyceride in different way in metabolic and in transcription level also. As we mentioned for ketosis and fatty liver, here, how can ketosis affect the dairy cow and how ketosis occur in dairy cows? When the cow gives birth and after calving, there are demand for nutrients and needs to support high milk production, and also at the same time, the feed intake, it is not enough to cover milk production. So the cow is undergoing to negative energy balance and also negative metabolizable protein balance. That is mean the cow in that time need to hydrolysis fat from their adipose tissue to support milk production and to fill out the gap between the consumed dry matter and the difference between milk production. And this is occurred during the first few weeks after calving, commonly 3 weeks after calving. This example of cow with the ketosis. This cow, when it measures the ketosis 2.1, that is mean in subclinical ketosis. Ketosis is divided and categorized into levels: subclinical ketosis and clinical ketosis. In normal one, up to less than 1.2 millimole per liter, that is a normal level, and the cow is normal and no incidence of ketosis. Between 1.2 up to 3, so this is the range of subclinical ketosis. When the concentration of beta hydroxybutyrate fall between this range, so that is means the cow has subclinical ketosis. More than 3 millimole per liter, so that is the clinical ketosis, and this is a severe for the dairy cow and lead to many problems for the dairy cows. There are also many solutions to deal with this, especially for nutrition strategies and the management strategies also to deal with this. As example, to add precursor, glucose precursor, like propylene glycol in the feed and in the diet, and sometimes it can give as a drench 300 milligram per day during the 3 days before calving for 1 week or 2 weeks, and also after calving directly and during the first few days after calving, until the blood beta hydroxybutyrate recovered in normal range. This is just as example. There are also additional strategies to deal and to improve and minimize the metabolic disorder incidence in dairy cows. Here, if we talk at this is a study conducted 2 years ago in Utrecht University in Netherlands. This is a study, they make a stimulation and they try to calculate how much dairy farming producer lost their money when the cow has ketosis. In two cases, for clinical and subclinical ketosis. In addition, also they calculate some lost for different parameter also as well. If we take a look, they categorize the simulation into 3 groups. No risk, that is means this cow is no incidence, and the second one, default, that is mean the normal occurrence rate in dairy farming, especially for the well management dairy farming, the incidence rate in lower level. This to represent the commercial dairy farming in reality. And the third one for the high risk of occurrence of disease. And they take many parameters like milk production, year for the whole cow, and the yearly milk production, and the feed cost, and the clinical cases by number, and the total subclinical ketosis, and the milk lost because the clinical ketosis, and also milk loss because subclinical ketosis, and displaced apomeism, and also clinical mastitis, and the time separate insemination, and the calf number per cows, and the calving interval, and the last parameter, they measure culling in the farm. In this farm, they make a simulation for the farm has 130 dairy cows as a model or as a standard for the simulation of this. If we take a look at the milk production as example for the first part, here is the milk production, and the decrease in milk production is linearly with the increase the risk of ketosis. You can show here 1.56. This is the total milk production for the cow, for the whole dairy cow, for 130 cows. And here, the second one, the milk production per cow per year. Here, the cow 8 ton, 891, and here about 60 kilogram difference, and here for the high risk about 100 kilogram lower in milk production compared with low risk. Okay. For the feed cost also, feed cost and the consumed dry matter is decreased when the cow has ketosis or when the incidence rate is higher. The clinical ketosis in the first one, it is 0, and in the default 2 cows, that is around 1.5% or 1%. And this is reflected the normal KPI for ketosis in dairy cows, especially for well-managed dairy farm. When the high risk is high, so we have 6 cows, that is about 5% for clinical ketosis. For subclinical ketosis, for the default one, 16 cows, that is equal to 10%, around 10%. And for the high, 37 cows, this is around 30% for the high risk level. And also at the same time, they calculated the loss of milk production near to half ton for the default one, and for the high risk, more than 1 ton loss of milk. If the milk production now, the cost of a kilogram milk production is 0.35 United States dollar per each kilogram, so we can calculate how much we lost the milk because the incidence of ketosis. This is only for one factor in addition to the other cost for the feed and the cost of fertility and immunity and the health and other parameters for short and for long term also. For subclinical ketosis, the loss of milk production is high into level for the default and the high risk. It is more than 5 times than clinical ketosis, and this can explain also to us why milk production is higher than in the lost because subclinical, because in that time most of cow is disappears and not picked up, so sometime not discovered and no medicine to be taken, so this means the cow to still lose the milk, and as we can show here in the first one nearly to 3 tons lost for 130 cows, and for the high risk, more than 6,000 kilogram lost in milk. For displaced apomism, normal range 1.5 or 1%, and for the high percent, for the high level risk, and for the clinical mastitis and the dissemination and other parameter, as the incidence rate is become higher, so the loss become higher also. So the relation is positive 2 times. For the culling interval as important parameter of KPI, key performance indicator to evaluate the fertility in dairy farming. Also, there are 3 days difference between default and no risk, and 8 days open difference between the high risk comparing with no risk. 8 days multiple by 130 dairy cows, multiple by the feed intake every day for the fresh cow. If we consider the cow consume around 20 kilogram dry matter intake, and the cost of each kilogram dry matter intake around 0.3 United States dollar. So we can calculate how much also lost of dry matter intake and the days open, and finally it will increase the calving interval and will decrease the longevity of dairy in the cow in the farm. Also, I posted here the citation of this paper, so if someone would like to take more details and more information about the paper, so you can able to read and to get more data. Here in this table, they calculate the annual net cash flow in euro in 3 groups. And in 2 columns, in right 2 columns, they make the difference between the default and the high risk comparing with the no risk. So as example, for milk production, if we see there are 2,600 euro saving between the default and the no risk. This is more income. And for the difference between the high default and the no risk, so 4,000 euro. For my opinion, when I evaluate this stimulation, I suggest and I prefer to compare the default with the high risk, because the first one, no risk, this is in reality, this is tended to be in theory more than applicable. So I prefer to compare the default with the high risk, because the default, this is reflect the main situation in the farming, and the high risk, this is reflect the incidence and the occurrence of metabolic disease in the farming. So this is more applicable. And also as the same sequence, they calculate the difference in each of all these parameters, feed cost and clinical ketosis for milk production, because the clinical ketosis incidence and subclinical, and also the cost of treatment, the cost of displaced abomasum and the mastitis and insemination, and the calf management also. If we look at the insemination, we can see the cost. The cost is higher when the cow in high risk, because also ketosis is affected in fertility, not only in the milk production, but also affect in fertility and the effect in health. If we calculate the loss of money and the cost, because treating the subclinical and the clinical ketosis, and the cost to deal with the displaced abomasum, okay, as this parameter is calculated here. The cost of calf management is almost similar, is a little difference, just 500 and 170 comparing the 2 groups. The culling cost also as a KPI to assess the fertility in commercial dairy farm. The difference also, it is too large here comparing the two groups, because when the cow has ketosis, so this is affect infertility and insemination and the time of the cow to be pregnant, and increase the days in milk at conception, and decrease the pregnancy rate and conception rate. So finally, it will decrease the fertility efficiency and increase the susceptibility of the cow to leave the herd. Collected all this together, so we have here the total. So finally, the total comparing the no risk with the default, so more than 3,600 European euro. And in the second level, comparing the high risk with the no risk, so the number is doubled and is reached more than 7,000 euro. Focus in ketosis. Here in this chart, we can show the cost of each ketosis and the partition and the contribution of each one factor of this in total cost. In the first one, in number A, so here we have one clinical ketosis, and here is can show the treatment contributes 35%, almost 1/3 of the total cost, and followed by the loss of milk production, the cost of loss of milk production, and then the contribution of reproduction and culling and other disease. The main contribution of the cost in clinical ketosis is the treatment, because the cow need a lot of treatment, and this is make a cost of the dairy farm. And the second one, the cost of milk production. If we compare with the contribution of the cost in subclinical ketosis, we can show the large portion of cost is referred to the milk production, more than 60%, because the loss of milk production comparing to 27, more than double. And the cost of treatment is 13%, is less than 50% of the cost of treatment in clinical ketosis. The cost of reproduction and the culling in this case also is less than in clinical ketosis. So here we would like to mention that the cost here of milk production is less and here is high. So that is mean the cow is lost a lot of milk production when he has subclinical ketosis. Even that the treatment and the medicine, it is less than as a cost, because the medicine given to the cow is a little, or it may be sometime didn't take any medicine. At the same time, the reduction of milk yield, and the losses of milk yield is still continue for long time. So here it can explain to us why milk production here is higher than clinical ketosis. And here is the calculation, the amount how they assumed the value of each parameter. As example, if we took for milk price, they calculate based in $0.35 per kilogram, euro, sorry. And for the feed cost, and for the medication, and for the labor and the diagnosis and the veterinary service and the Carb price and all here as we can show. High dairy cows need a lot of dairy fat. Mostly it can reach up to 6.5% as a dry matter, or in some cases it can reach up to 7% for high lactating dairy cow and the diet to feed to the cow during the peak of milk. So in that time, supplying emulsification such as bile acid, it can assist in improve fat digestion and also assist in triglyceride metabolism and assist in decreasing the incidence rate of metabolic disorder like ketosis and fatty liver. In this case, bile acid can enhance liver health and decrease burden and increase feed intake and improve production and the milk quality. Bile acid also protects the liver and improves the small intestine health and the liver by promoting conversion triglyceride to very low density lipoprotein and reduce fat deposition that cause fatty liver, and also assist in remove toxin, so it can improve liver health, and also stimulate bile acid receptor, so it can activate FXR, so it can stimulate gene transcription that can assist in lipid metabolism. In this part, I would like to show the result of one experiment conducted here in China in transition dairy cows. And in next time, I will discuss with you the result of experiment performed in beef cows and in young neonatal calf also. In this experiment, the study is conducted in large commercial dairy farm in China. The farm has capacity 10,000 head, including about 60,000 milking dairy cows. That is almost 60% of the total group. The experiment lasted for 4 months at the end of August until January in 2020. They used 430 cows and is divided in 2 groups, control groups and the bile acid groups. And each group of this is divided in 50 cows in each group to make a replication. And the supplementary rate 0.15%, that is corresponding to about 20 grams during a close-up and about 30 grams during the fresh period. The diet is formulated based in CNCBS version 7 using the commercial version of EMTS. The parameter estimated and analyzed in this experiment for milk production and the health parameter and the culling and some fertility. Here, the ration composition and the analysis. In table number 1, we can show the TMR composition. They feed as TMR, and the bile acid is mixed with the premix, and then mixed with the concentrate, and then mixed together with the forage and the ravage, and then delivered to the cow in the feed bank. Here is the diet for the close-up and for the fresh cows, and here is the ingredient. Mostly they're using during a close-up, they're using the high forage diet. The main source for corn silage and the oat hay and the grass. This is available here in China, and the price also is acceptable. So we try to increase the level of this forage, and also especially this forage, it is high quality. And we don't feed the cow alpha hay during the close-up to minimize the potassium level in the diet. This diet is balanced during the close-up to be negative decad, and the decad we balance it to be minus 150 per kilogram milli equivalent per kilogram dry matter. This is for the dairy cows, and for the heifer, we don't use decad diet. To balance the decad, we're using the anionic salt like chloride and sulfur to decrease the decad to the targeted level, and decrease the concentration of cationic salt like calcium, like potassium, manganese, and sodium. The source of protein we used soybean meat as a source of protein, and also they use pre-war grain. For the premix, we're using during the close-up, we're using the premix to contain a package of premix containing mineral and the vitamins and the yeast and some protected amino acid and the toxic binder also as well. For the fresh cow diet, mainly we're using the forage source from alpha hay and the corn silage, and we use also oat hay to improve the NDF and the NDF from forage source. So we can show the forage ratio in fresh cow diet more than 50%. So in this case, we can assure that the rumen function is well and the pH is more stable, so it can assist the microflora to perform it is work well. During the 2 times we used during the close-up, we're using high density energy 1.5, and during the fresh period we're using 1.7 net energy of lactation per megacalorie per kilogram dry matter. In FC during the close-up within the lower level near to 35, just 36, and the NDF it is high because we're using a lot of forage during this time, and the forage, most of them, it is high in NDF. Ether is extract around 3.5 and 4.5 during the fresh period and 3.5 during the close-up. Crop protein, when we adjust the diet, we prefer to adjust the crude protein to be around 16 to be 16.5. In previous, sometime we adjust the crude protein to be higher, to be 17, and sometimes 17.5 for fresh cows, and in close-up cow to be 15.5 up to 16. But when we adjust the diet to around 16 and 16.2 in this time, so the result is good. So many years ago, we kept the design of diet for close-up and for fresh cow around 16. In that time also, we added, we worked to improve the metabolizable protein, not only for crude protein. We try mainly to focus to improve the profile of amino acid and to improve the amount of metabolizable proteins that reach to the animal and to the small intestine to be absorbed. So this is our main target. Dry matter, we adjusted to be about 50% during the close-up and to be 60% around during the fresh period. And we try to adjust this if the diet need to add some additional water. So this is just a brief about the diet. And it may be in the future, it may be we try to design for separated webinar to discuss about the ration formulation and using the mechanistic software like CNCBS commercial model as implemented in MTS or NDS. It may be in the future. So this is just mention some details about the ration, how we design the ration that used in the current experiment. Here, the result section of this experiment. The first one, as we focus in the heels. So here, this figure, we can show the proportion of the clinical ketosis and subclinical ketosis for the two groups. Look at the subclinical ketosis in control group, comparing with bile acid group. The subclinical is decreased from 24 to 9%. Around 15% is lower when the cow received bile acid. And for the clinical ketosis, is lower from about 6 up to 1.5. So we saved 4.5% in bile acid group. That's explained to us how bile acid can affect ketosis and how it can improve the animal health. The explanation for the ketosis, this is also an important point, how bile acid can minimize the incidence risk of clinical ketosis. At the moment, there are no research about for bile acid to assess its efficacy in ketosis in commercial dairy farm. So the only explanation for this that bile acid improve the oxidation of non-steroid fatty acid in the liver by activating L-carnitine. L-carnitine, the main function is to transport free fatty acid from cytosol to mitochondria to oxidation. After oxidation, is produce energy. When the oxidation it is not complete, so it produces ketone body. As ketosis tested in this experiment using beta hydroxybutyrate level in fast rapid kits that is used in the dairy farm. So that is the only explanation. NIFA concentration in the blood it is lower, or the oxidation level is enhanced by bile acid supplementation. So the final product is energy and minimize the concentration level of beta hydroxybutyrate. So this is the only concentration, and we try to make more confirmation for the next future when we design the experiment of the dairy cow and commercial dairy cows later. Here in this figure, the percent of the healthy cow and ketosis cows. For the group received bile acid supplementation, the rate of the dairy cow 85% and about 70% for the control group. Also about 15% improve in healthy ratio and improved in healthy cows. And also this is to reflect the efficiency and the improvement in the health and the liver when the cow receive bile acid. That is mean out of 100 cow, 85 cows is the good health and the level of beta hydroxybutyrate within the normal level comparing with the control group. Response for milk production during the peak of milk that occur about 30 days in milk up to 70 days in milk in dairy cows. So here we compare the difference in milk for before feeding the bile acid. Here in the blue one, comparing when the cow received bile acid. More than 3.5 kilogram milk production improved. And the difference is significant here in this star. That is statistically difference. More than 3 kilogram and 3.5 kilogram difference in response to milk production during the peak of lactation, and also at the same time improved during the fresh milk. In the future, we will try to increase the length time of the experiment to cover the mid of lactation, and it may be to cover the whole lactation and evaluate different parameters of milk and fertility and the health and even antioxidant and the oxidative stress of the cow and the immunity also. Retained placenta as one also of the important metabolic disorder disease. Retained placenta commonly measured after calving, and the cow to be considered as retained placenta after 24 hours of calving and still has a placenta. If a decent placenta during 24 hours, so it is normal, it's okay. After 24 hours, so it is considered retained placenta, and it is still need more checking and more diagnosis. Here is the ratio before bile acid supplementation, the rate about 20%, and it's low is dropped to 5% after adding bile acid, almost 15%. So how bile acid also can improve retained placenta rate? The explanation also for this that bile acid, it may be improve the contraction and effect in tissue movement and in tissue motility. So it can assist the cow and uterus to descend the placenta and increasing the contraction after calving. The effect of bile acid for this, the last parameter, and this effect in culling rate. Culling rate also measured here during the first 60 days in milk, and also this is one of the important KPI in commercial dairy farm. And it can calculate also automatically by using software. There are many software management software, dairy farm management software, like Dairycomb and also Alpro and AV Farm. Also all this, it can generate it and calculate this parameter automatically. During the first 60 days in milk, the level of culling a cow is dropped up 7.6% from 14%, almost as half when the cow received bile acid. And this is the important parameter. When the culling rate during this time, during the first 2 months, that is the voluntary waiting period or forage period, if we evaluate it based in the fertility, increasing the culling rate during this time, this reflects the level of management and the management of nutrition and the whole management of the dairy farm. In well-management dairy farm, this level is lower to be less than 1%. Okay. So the conclusion of this study, we can conclude it based in the result of this experiment that bile acid supply at 0.15% during the transition period, including close-up and the fresh period, positively affect animal performance and decrease and minimize the incidence of some metabolic disorder disease of dairy cows, like incidence rate of ketosis and decrease the occurrence of fatty liver, improve milk production, and reduce the culling rate during the first 60 days of lactation, and also decrease the incidence of retained placenta during the fresh period. And later, this will affect in subsequent lactation and also will affect in the performance of fertility of the cow during the lactation in many parameters, like days in milk at lactation or conception or pregnancy rate, as example. The new perspective on application of bile acid to ruminant, this is a promise product and a promise strategy to enhance and maximize the efficiency and the profitability of dairy farm. Bile acid play an important role in fat digestion in addition to lipase. In this case, he works as emulsifier, and this is the main role. And the second one, it improves the animal efficiency and the productivity by minimize the incidence of some metabolic disorder disease as confirmed by fatty liver and ketosis and retained placenta. So finally, it can improve the performance and the efficiency of dairy cow in many aspects. Considering this result in milk production and yields, we think that bile acid is a promising additives for economic and sustainable milk production and the meat production also in beef cows, and should be considered in feed for commercial dairy farming operation. That is all in our part. Thank you. And if there any question or comment, please write in comment section or send your inquiry to email. Again, and as the end, thank you again for all attendees and for participating and attending this webinar. And we would like also to invite you to attend the next webinar next week that organized by our company in coordination with our partner during next week in 27 and 28 April. This is a 2 days series webinar. Again, thank you again, and we look forward to next webinar. Thank you again.